Hello everyone, thank you for joining this Your Overseas Home webinar. It's great to have you all with us today, whether you're joining us live or catching up on demand. My name is Roseanne Bradley. I'm a senior copywriter at French Property Guides and Your Overseas Home. Today we will be chatting with Fabien Pellissier, founder of Fab French Insurance, about visa applications, medical and other insurances needed for a safe and secure move to France. So hi Fabien, thanks for joining us today.
Hello Rosie.
It'd be great if you could just start by introducing yourself and tell us exactly what Fab French do.
Yeah, sure. Well, as the wording might suggest, we are doing the sexiest thing ever, which is selling insurance. But I founded a company in 2015, and the main focus has always been towards the English-speaking community living in France. And we've broadened the services, the range of services over time, especially since Brexit, to also include admin services, like visa application, vehicle import, car registration, driving license exchange, all that kind of stuff. Although we do remain a broker by heart, so it means that whatever we do, we will remain independent, even when we do offer consultation or advice, so that we refer them to the people we're working with, but our advice would always be independent. So basically the goal is to help them move to France as simply as Frenchly possible.
Fabulous, thank you. To all our viewers, this webinar will be lasting about 30 minutes. If you have a question as we go along, it's just going to be a conversational chat between me and Fabien. Feel free to chime in. If you've got any questions, there is a tab on the right hand side of your screen that you can enter them in, and I can ask Fabien on your behalf. So if you need a reminder of anything discussed today or want to share this with family and friends, you will be able to access a replay probably tomorrow on the Your Overseas Home website. So let's get started. Fabien, what is the difference between a long stay visa and a temporary long stay visa?
Well, so technically they're all, if you want to stay in France for more than 90 days, you need to apply for a long stay visa. But there are two different types indeed, and within each type there are like subcategories, but we'll get there afterwards. So the long-term visa, it's called the VLSTS in France. It's a 12-month or plus visa, because it's a renewable visa, so it could be 12 months or more, like it could be renewed for years. The temporary long stay is a 6-month visa. It's really when you have like a short-term project, because it's a 6-month visa and it's non-renewable. So I heard many people asking us, can I use this because I have a secondary home in France? So can I use this to, just come and go to France for more than 90 days within the year? No, that's probably not the best option, because it's 6 months, but you have to be like a fixed range, like 1st of January to 1st of July, for example. And so it's not flexible. And again, there is like a cool-off period, so you can't renew it straight away if you need to extend by another 6 months or else. So yeah, so usually we tend to go for the 12-month visa because it's more flexible. It's not that hard to secure. Compared to the 6-month visa, they're pretty much the same requirement.
Okay, great. And how would you go about applying for the long stay visa?
Well, for once, France has improved, because it's all digital now. Pretty much. So you can apply online through a portal called francevisa.gov.fr. But you can apply online, France Visa. So everything can be done digitally. There is the requirement to attend to a physical meeting, though. Well, eventually. It's mandatory. It's non-negotiable. But apart from that, the whole process has to be done online.
Okay. And what documents would you need to provide to back up your application?
Well, it's pretty standard. A copy of a passport, actually the original of the passport, some pictures, IDs, and so proof of accommodation, proof of travel. They require a couple documentation. It's all listed on the France Visa website. there are obviously some variations in regard to which type, so the subcategory of visa you'll be applying for. So for example, for the business visa, you'll require a business plan. If it's a student visa, they'll ask for the documentation from your school and things like that. So you may require, if it's a family visa, because your spouse is, for example, an EU citizen, then they'll need a marriage certificate and things like that. So it varies a bit, but they are basically three main requirements are pretty much standard. Again, depending on the visa, most of the time. So proof of accommodation, you need to have a French address if you want to apply for a permanent, so a 12-month visa or more. You need to have proof of income or savings. We'll get there later as well. And you need to have proof of medical cover for the duration of the visa, although you may be able to apply after 90 days. But then we'll talk about that as well.
Okay. And has the application process for the France visa changed since the UK left the EU?
And for, well, yes, obviously, it's not the same. I mean, British expats could have come to France without the requirement for a visa before. So they can still come to France if it's for less than 90 days trip or stay. Actually, it's 90 days every 180 days. So basically 90 days every 6 months for a 6-month period. But there are still a couple agreements, post-Brexit agreements that have been made, which are pretty good. One, for example, once they are in France, they can still use the British license to drive in France. I would say pretty much indefinitely, although in theory, after 1 year, they need to have applied for a French license. And it's also good to do that, because for every other admin processes you might start, it will prove that you've made a move permanently, to France. But yeah, and technically speaking, even if 5 years into their relocation, they still have the British license, they'll be fine. It's non-compliant in theory, but they'll be fine. Another thing is for the temporary visa, there is the another post-Brexit agreement. We'll talk about that later. But so basically, yes, there is a difference now. They need to apply for the visa if they want to stay 90 days in France, more than 90 days, and it needs to be done again online. But yeah, less than 90 days, not much of a difference.
And is that 90-day rule? So if anyone wants to stay longer than 90 days, is that the same rule for Americans and other non-EU citizens?
So yes, basically, the British expats have become pretty much in the same category as Americans, South Africans, Australians. So they're all the same, I could say. British expats still do have an advantage over Americans, for example, thanks to some post-Brexit agreements, mostly the S1 and the GE, but we'll talk about that later as well, and the driver license that I've mentioned, for example. Some agreements like these that makes the move a bit easier for British citizens compared to American citizens, for example.
No, that's great. What are some of the different long stay visas available? So what are my options if I want to work in France or run a gig, or maybe even set up my own business?
Well, so actually, when you apply for a visa, you need to have what I call a reason. There is, why do you want to come to France for, that long? So that reason is actually what will determine the type of visa, so the category of visa you'll be applying for. The most popular options by far and large usually is the tourist visa. They couldn't have come with a more confusing wording, because it's tourist, but it's a long-term visa. So actually, you're not a tourist, it's to become a resident, but they've called it the tourist or visitor visa. So it's the visitor visa that's the most popular. So this one, if you're not working, that's the one you'll go for, or retirees, people like this. If you want to run a gîte business, Airbnb, set up a business, this is going to be, well, some would call it the entrepreneur visas. It's like the business visa. It's one of the hardest to get, one of the most expensive as well. So if it can be avoided, we try to find other ways around. but it's definitely possible. There is also, the student visa for students. It comes with many flavors, but the most popular definitely is the business visa, or definitely the business visa and the visitor visa. There are more than 8 different types just for the VLSTS, and different flavors, but yeah, these are the most popular.
You said that one is the most expensive to apply for. What is do you know the fee for the VLTS?
Well, technically speaking, this is the same price, but I'm saying it's the most expensive because when you go for the business visa, it's kind of suicidal to go there on your own. So you probably will have, you probably could manage on your own for a visitor visa, because if you actually meet the requirements, it's probably manageable. So you don't need to pay any consultant fees and whatever. For a business visa, for example, as you need to provide a business plan to French authorities, and the business plan is not a standard document, you need to make sure you highlight the proper things, that the document mentions the things that French authorities will want to see. And you need to make sure it's not overly optimistic, because 1 year later, if you still intend to remain in France at the renewal date, they'll get the business plan back and say, okay, well, you said you'll be doing this. Did you do it? And for a sheet, for example, most of the time you fail short, simply because you've done renovation work. You thought you'd be on your tracks by the 90 days, after 90 days, and actually it took 6 months of renovation work. So I would highly suggest seeking assistance, but therefore it means it's more expensive.
Thank you. My next question, if anyone watching has a EU or French spouse in France, do you need a visa to join them?
So, well, this one is, well, there is a theoretical response and more fit on the ground answer. But, well, in theory, if you're traveling with a spouse, so at the same time, then you can avoid the visa. But well, practically for everything else, you'll be, every admin process you'll start, it's probably going to be an issue eventually. And if you have to do round trips to the UK and come back without your spouse, well, you might be caught in something you don't want to. Again, admin-wise, it's not illegal, but so, and again, considering that the visa itself is really not that expensive, we're probably talking about, I don't know, 335, 350, something like that, euros. So it's not very expensive. But so the short answer is yes. A more detailed one is, well, it really depends on what you're trying to do. But depending on the situation, I'd probably advise you should apply for a visa anyway, because there is the family visa, and you'd have options. Or the talent visa if the spouse is working in France, and you're the spouse of someone working in France could work as well. She's working in an industry that needs labor. So yeah.
Okay. And can you explain the health insurance requirements for the long stay visa application?
So actually, again, insurance is the sexiest topic, as we all know, but it's actually one of the main reasons of visa. Well, I would say rejection. It's not really rejection. It's more like you need to reapply. Basically, when you first file your visa application, the top reason why the first application gets denied is because of the insurance bit. Many things, travel insurance would copy it, or Schengen travel plan, hospitalization only or emergencies only policies, all that stuff would not be accepted. Any policy with an excess or a deductible or a copay or whatever you call it would be also rejected. So you need something that's comprehensive in an outpatient benefit without any excess or deductible. You need a policy that covers at least 30,000 euros, but this is on paper. So in the UK, that would be TLS, the subcontractor that deals with the visa applications. So TLS, for example, in London would require 100,000 euros. We don't know why. They probably do think Londoners are posher. I don't know. But in the US, you'd have the same situation with VFS. In some centers there in New York, for example, they will expect 100,000 as well. So I prefer to go for the 100,000 to be on the safe side. It doesn't impact the premium as well. You need to have repatriation as well on your policy. Yeah, but that's also why we're here, because we like, when we have someone, we're like, okay, so this is the policy we would advise in your case for the visa application, because it's been battle tested, and on most of our plan we offer 100% money back guarantee. So it makes it easier, instead of having to swallow all the technical requirements and make sure you do match all the criteria. But yeah, that.
Yeah. Do you need a private health insurance for the temporary long stay visa, so the 6-month one?
Yeah. So well, this is an interesting question, because so yes, you do, but British expats will have a massive hedge on this one, because it's one of the great post-Brexit agreement they can use. So you can apply for the GEIC, which is the replacement of the EIC you used to have. But so you can apply for a GEIC for free with the NHS, and with the GEIC, basically you can void the requirement for the 6-month visa, so for the private medical insurance.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that.
So
I actually recently got mine. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that if your EHIC's still valid, you can still use that. But obviously when it
EHIC
runs
is no
out,
longer
you
valid,
have to
though.
get the GEIC.
No, yeah, that's a problem though, because sometimes the NHS will not want to issue you a GEIC because you still have a valid EHIC, and the EHIC is denied though. It has to be the GEIC. You need to have a GEIC. So if you still have a valid EHIC, this is an issue. But if not, you can apply for the GEIC and you're fine.
Okay, fabulous. And what sort of price range is an applicant looking at for a suitable 1-year health insurance policy?
Well, obviously it depends. It depends on the age band. Well, statistically, most of the expats we see, that tends to be in their 50s or 60s, mostly in the 50s. Obviously, we have students, we have all ages, but so well, I'll take the example of someone in his or her 50s, but well, let's say late 50s, probably going to be around €2,000 a year per person. Early 50s, more like 1,500. But it's basically the price range. Obviously, it depends if there are medical conditions. If depends on the situation. But that's just to throw out some numbers out there, to be taken with buckets of salt, though.
So I've just got a follow-up question from your from the requirements. So the health insurance requirements for a long stay visa. Can you outline that a bit more simply?
Yeah, well, there are tons of requirements. That's what I'm saying. This is why it's because even if you meet the requirements, but for example, your policy is a travel insurance, or if it's a Schengen policy, that would be denied. That's why I was explaining this, because some types of policies will be automatically denied. Then if you are in the right category, which should be like medical insurance or private medical insurance or private health insurance, then you need to make sure there are no excess or deductible. So again, to be on the safe side, €100,000, although the theoretical requirement is €30,000. Repatriation is included. In and outpatient should be covered. So basically, the policy should be comprehensive. No exclusions should be mentioned. And that's it for the requirements. And then you have like optional requirements, which are good to have, like nice to have, but not mandatory.
Okay. And once you're a resident in France,
there is one super important that I forgot, but it's more like it's not due to the policy. It needs to cover the entire duration of the visa. And this one is, well, it seems logical. Some policies would actually force you to actually start the policy like right now, even if to have the certificate in hands by the time you go to the physical interview, even though you may have scheduled to come to France in, I don't know, like 1st of August, for example. If you do that, then the certificate of insurance, it's only issued for 1 year. So it will fall short because your visa application is actually for 1st of August 2023 to 2024. And then you will have cover for, I don't know, let's say 1st of July 2023 to July 2024. And then you're short a month. So if you're in that category, then there is a mandatory requirement that the certificate of insurance do mention that the policy will be automatically renewed. This one is important. If you match the date of your application, don't have to have that mentioned. But if you don't, then it's very important.
Okay, that makes sense. So once you're a resident in France, are you then entitled to French healthcare? And does that mean that you no longer need your insurance? So basically,
this is a very, very common question because, and I think, so the short answer is yes, you're entitled to the French system, but you have to wait 90 days. Okay, can do nothing until you've been around for 90 days or more. And this is a misconception. People think, okay, now I can get rid of the medical insurance after 90 days because I'll be covered by the French system. So this cannot be further away from the truth, because the problem is after 90 days, you're just allowed to start the application process to actually enter the French system. Doesn't mean you'll be part of the French system after 90 days. Most of the time, it's more like 9 months to actually get into the French system. And this is being optimistic. You know, some people are still not into the system by the time the visa actually expires or needs to be renewed. So this is also why they want to make sure that you'll be covered for the 1 year. And this is very important. I mean, it's important to hear that because you need to be covered for 1 year, even if you think you'll be granted access within 90 days, 6 months, whatever. This has to be a 1 year cover, because they know, you know, the prefecture and all, you know, the consulates and all these places, they know it's far from being granted. And even if you do everything by the books, you might, you know, still have forgotten something in your file, you know, the carte vitale application, you know, French social security. You might have forgotten something and actually have to restart from square one. So yeah, you need to be covered. So some policies actually can be canceled if you are within the French system. Some will allow that, but this is far from the norm. And most of the time, these policies tend to be more expensive to actually compensate for the benefit that they're providing you, allowing you to cancel early. So at the end of the day, I very often advise to go for like a one-off plan, because it, like a vast majority of the time, ends up being much cheaper.
Okay. I'll get around to some questions now from our audience. Richard is asking, does the long-term visa allow for numerous cross-channel trips? Or once you're in France, do you have till the visa expires to come back? Or do you?
No, well, actually, well, the good news is you're not in jail. So you can do pretty much whatever you want. Actually, you can even apply for the 1 year visa and never come to France if you like. It's like probably a bit stupid to do that because you would have wasted quite a lot of money. But I mean, you can do pretty much whatever you'd like. You do have some requirements if you want to see the process further. Obviously, if you want to apply for the French healthcare, for example, so for French social security, so what we call CPAM, which is exactly the equivalent of the NHS. If you want to apply for that, then you need to have lived in France. But again, lived in France means you need to have been around. So for 3 months, 6 months, you know, it depends. 6 months, you become a tax resident. 3 months, you become a resident, a permanent resident. So that doesn't prevent you from doing round trips to the UK, you know, as long as these trips don't exceed 90 days, then you would remain a French citizen if this was your original goal. So yeah, you do. And actually, and you can also travel wherever you want within the Schengen area, because that visa would be valid all across the Schengen area as well.
Yeah, so you can benefit from those rules. No, of course. Barbara asks, can you get a French visa without an address? Danger being that if I've purchased a property and have visa refused, that would be a problem.
Yeah. So actually there is something we do very often in that particular context. This is usually the person you intend to purchase the house from would usually be very happy, and we can arrange that, to actually write a lease agreement. Because the short answer is yes, you do need a permanent French address. Otherwise, the visa is automatically denied. So you do need an address. But there is an easy workaround. The workaround is you have a house you'd like to purchase. You can make an offer. You can withdraw within 90 days. So you do have time to apply for the visa in the meantime. And you can ask the current owners, whatever they lived in the house or not, it's no big deal. You can ask them to actually write a lease agreement, a contract, a rental agreement with you as the tenant, which we can use at the visa center. And everyone will be thrilled with this, because the seller would be thrilled, because it does prove that you're committed to actually purchase the property. But obviously you would benefit from this, because then you would have the address already, and the visa center will see that you've made a commitment because you have a 12-month contract. And I mean, we've done that plenty of times. No seller have refused us this. So yeah. And just to be on the safe side as well, visitor visas, if you do check, if you have the income, because that's the most important. If you have the income, which is the equivalent of the minimum wage in France, 1,300 basically a month, or the equivalent yearly as a lump sum on as savings, then if you have that plus the insurance plus an address, we've had 100% acceptance rate since mid-2021. So if you check all the boxes, the rejection is basically you're not coming from countries that France do not like. It's not like you were Russian. So there are no rejections.
Okay, fab. Here we go. Satpal is hoping to buy a holiday home in France and stay there on and off for a few months a year. He's told he has to do a tax return form even if he has no business in France. Is that true?
No, it's not correct. Well, it depends again on the exact situation of the person. But if it's just a holiday home, you're just going on and off, and you don't spend more than 6 months in France, whatever this is in a row, 6 months per year, then no, you're just a tourist, basically. I think, again, as long as you don't violate the 90 days per 180 days rules, and you're not staying for more than 6 months per year in France, as long as you abide by these rules, you don't need to do anything. You're a tourist.
Okay. I think we've got time for just one more question. If we haven't got round to yours, don't worry. They will be forwarded to Fabienne and the team at Fab French, who will be in touch with you. I've had a few people ask for Fabienne's email, which we will, of course, share with you. And it will also be confirmed in an email to you tomorrow. So don't panic about that. Let me just find the question I was going to ask.
There is one thing I'd like to mention, because I think it's very important. One of the post-Brexit agreements, that's both a good thing and the thing I not always advise, is the S1 form. So if you are a retiree and you have state pension, so it needs probably it depends if you're in the force, maybe you're younger, but it probably means you're 67 or more. These guys can apply for something called the S1, which would also prevent them from having private medical insurance, even for the 12-month visa. The problem with this is that they would also forfeit their rights to the NHS. Obviously, they can reapply later, but once you're out, it's not as easy, as it was. So to come back in, and therefore, especially when this is a first move, I often advise to be very cautious with this. And again, you have to consider that the private basically the only thing you'd be saving here is the private medical insurance. And it's only for the first year, whereas you would have forfeited your rights to the NHS forever. So the S1 is like a double-edged sword. So it depends. It's on a case-by-case scenario, but I would be cautious with this.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you. I think that's about all we've got time for today. Thank you, Fabian, for all your insightful tips and advice.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. We do strongly recommend that everyone listening does get in touch with Fab French Insurance directly, as they'll be able to discuss your details and your requirements in a lot more detail. So we'll be in touch with their details shortly after this webinar. Fabian and his team are actually offering everyone register for this webinar a discounted consultation that you'll be able to book by following the link that we'll share just now. For our viewers watching the webinar on demand later, you'll find this link in the description below. So a lot of insurance companies, lawyers, all of these types of businesses that you will need to move to France do charge a consultation fee. But yes, as I said, Fabian is kindly offering a discounted rate that you can definitely take advantage of today.
And it's refunded if you end up doing business with any of our partners anyway. So we've negotiated that as well. So
fabulous. So thanks again, Fabian. Thanks for sharing your knowledge with us. And thank you to all our listeners for joining us. Thanks again, and I hope to see you in France one day.
Yeah,
Goodbye.
it was. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Rosie.